10 years ago, a film was released that profoundly affected not just me, but the entire internet media discourse, and I want to talk about it.
This is just a tribute, you gotta believe it, and I wish you were there, it's just a matter of opinion.
Welcome back, my friend. Can you believe it's been 10 years since the release of Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice? Arguably the most contentious Hollywood blockbuster ever made, a film that had a uniquely polarising and combative effect on how we converse with strangers about film over the internet. I've never seen a film before or since that's so zealously defended by its fans or more venomously attacked by its detractors. Look, I'm acutely aware that this film has been, and continues to be, talked about ad nauseum by both camps. For those who haven't seen my video, Immigrant Song, defending Zack Snyder's Superman, make no mistake, I love this film. I'm firmly in the defender camp, but I'm not actually here to litigate the film's quality. If you're watching this video, you already have an opinion on this film, and another bearded white guy with a YouTube channel isn't likely to change it. Besides, in terms of analysing the content, there's not a whole lot of new insight I can give you. What I'd like to do instead is to pay tribute to this film by walking you through my own personal relationship with it. Like any love story, it has its ups and its downs, but like all my video essays, it ends with a positive and hopeful note. Get comfy and pour yourself a bowl of Batman v Superman cereal, because we're about to go back in time to 2013. It is without hyperbole that I say Man of Steel saved my life. In the spring of 2013, I was not having a good time. I was going through a divorce, I had lost my job, I was living in a house that had become a prison both emotionally and financially. My life had become a joyless, anxiety-riddled slog, with no sign of light at the end of the tunnel. I had, and still have, a wonderful network of friends, but increasingly saw myself as a burden to them. At the age of 31, I had decided I'd rather not see 32 and started looking into the least painful and violent way to drift off. It's strange how, even in its darkest moments, the human mind will cling to whatever flotsam and jetsam it can to save itself. Mine clung to the third trailer for Man of Steel, which, serendipitously, dropped right as I was at my lowest ebb. I watched the images of this new and very different Superman film play out on screen, accompanied by Hans Zimmer's rousing score, and I thought that this might be something worth sticking around for. I'm aware of how absurd it sounds that a trailer for a Hollywood film would be the thing my flailing mind would cling to. Still, watching that trailer became my go-to self-soothing mechanism when things got tough. Well, that and the Five Guys burger reaction guy, remember him? As Man of Steel's release grew closer, my decision to stick around was vindicated. I found new work, I moved into a cozy flat in a new city, and managed to rebuild a new life from the wreckage of the old one. It was in this context, relocated, gainfully employed and cautiously optimistic for the future, that I settled into my IMAX seat on opening Friday afternoon. I was expecting to see a new take on Superman for a contemporary audience, uncoupled for the first time from the cinematic language of the Richard Donner films. I did get that, but I also got so much more. I got a budding DC universe that was baroque and Wagnerian, yet close enough to our real world to reach out and touch. I got a provocative blockbuster that took pop culture's most morally simplistic superhero and dropped him into our ethically ambiguous world, primary colours finding their place amid infinite shades of grey. I got an immigrant story that dared to frame the battle of multiculturalism versus settler colonialism in the context of Alien First Contact. Moreover, I got a character study that scratched away the trappings of the super and helped us find the man underneath. Henry Cavill's performance was understated yet commanding. His appearance was rugged yet regal. Christopher Reeve was the Superman of my childhood, but this would be the Superman of my adulthood. I left the cinema giddy with excitement. I couldn't wait to find out what the world thought of this bold reimagining of Superman's world. Then came the reviews. Contemporary reviews were mixed but largely negative, criticising the relentlessness of the action and the scope of the destruction. Moreover, comic literate commentators and Christopher Reeve purists came out in force to object to the film's depiction of Clark Kent. Some sentiments held that, at best, Man of Steel was a decent film, but a bad Superman film. Despite this, the film was generally well received among audiences and made a thoroughly respectable $670 million worldwide. It had generated enough goodwill that a sequel was greenlit almost immediately. Lex Luthor fancast proliferated on social media, and fans speculated about other glimpses into the greater DC universe that Man of Steel had already begun to seed. But I could sense a growing rumbling among certain sections of the online fandom that their character was being mishandled by a director and writers that fundamentally didn't understand him.
I want you to remember, Clark, in all the years to come, in all your most private moments, I want you to remember my hand at your throat. I want you to remember the one man who beat you.
Whoa! What? What? What?
At San Diego Comic-Con 2013, barely a month after Man of Steel's release, actor Harry Lennox read a piece of dialogue from Frank Miller's The Dark Knight Returns that set the crowd roaring. Batman was coming to the Man of Steel sequel, using the Superman film as a foundation on which to build a new DC cinematic universe that would retroactively be called the DC Extended Universe or DCEU, an unofficial moniker that stuck nonetheless. This meant that not one but two superhero franchises were due to be reimagined. Scarcely a year after The Dark Knight Rises tied a bow around Christopher Nolan and Christian Bale's interpretation of the character, we were getting a new version of Batman. When Ben Affleck was announced for the role, the fandom did what it's done since 1988. It lost its shit. Reactions ranged from the cautiously optimistic to the guano insane. Some fans were outraged that the actor who had already played Daredevil should get a second bite at the superhero apple. Others, like professional opinion haver Ben Shapiro, pointed to the mid-2000s rom-com nadir of Affleck's acting career as proof that the casting was a disaster, obstinately overlooking his successes as an actor and director since. One Twitter user even called Affleck's casting the worst thing to happen to the franchise since George Clooney's bat nipples. The run-up to Batman v Superman's release was one of the most intensely thrilling, weird and wonderful rollercoaster rides in the history of online fandom. It was a time at which anything seemed possible when every day yielded a new possibility, not just for Batman v Superman, but for the future of DC on film. New DC superhero castings were drip-fed to the fervent masses, including that of Israeli model turned actress Gal Gadot as Wonder Woman, indie wunderkind Ezra Miller as The Flash, charisma factory Jason Momoa as Aquaman, and promising theatre actor Ray Fisher as Cyborg, a former Teen Titan who progressed to Justice League membership in the 2011 New 52 DC Comics reboot. Warner Brothers began banging the hype drum with increasing intensity for its upcoming film and the new DC universe it was meant to springboard. In October 2014, the studio released an ambitious slate for their upcoming DC universe that would feature a standalone Wonder Woman film, a Suicide Squad feature, projects for Aquaman, Cyborg and The Flash, as well as Shazam and the Green Lantern Corps, with more Batman and Superman projects thrown in for good measure, not to mention a 2-part Justice League movie. This ambitious slate sent a clear signal to Marvel Studios that it was sending its own cinematic juggernaut to keep pace with the Marvel Cinematic Universe. A laudably ambitious goal, but one that fans were already starting to feel was ill-conceived or rushed. Nonetheless, by the time cameras finished rolling on BVS, production for Suicide Squad, Wonder Woman and Justice League were well underway. As a DC fan who loved Man of Steel and evangelised for it to anyone who'd listen, it felt like a banquet was being prepared just for me, and having already trauma bonded myself to that film and by extension that universe, my stomach was rumbling. Rumours and fan theories asserted themselves with absolute conviction, some intriguing, most completely insane. An empty pod in the scout ship in Man of Steel led to an assertion that Wonder Woman and the Amazons were in fact the descendants of ancient Kryptonians who'd settled on Earth. In an astonishing act of cope, some fans even proclaimed that Ben Affleck's Batman was obviously Deathstroke in disguise, and that the real Batman, Christian Bale, would return in the film's climax. When actress Jenna Malone was cast in a minor role, the world convinced itself that she was definitely going to play Batgirl. In a supreme act of trolling, Justin Bieber posed with a supposed copy of the Batman v Superman script and intimated that he'd been cast as Robin in the film. Naturally, the internet responded by demonstrating that it really didn't share the Canadian pop star's sense of humour. Honestly, I could make a whole video about the hinterland of fan imagination that bloomed into existence between 2013 and 2016, as the film's release was pushed back and forth. Throughout this time, I, like many fans, was meticulously writing, shooting and choreographing my own personal Batman v Superman film in my head, a film that extrapolated both from what I'd seen and loved in Man of Steel and what Marvel Studios was doing with its own cinematic efforts. A fun exercise, sure, but one that would prove detrimental to my experience actually watching the film. Imagine you're sitting at a table, upon which are 2 drinks. You've got a nice glass of red wine on one side, and a steaming hot caramel latte on the other. When you taste that caramel latte, you're going to get an initial hit of sweetness. Once that subsides, you're likely to get the earthy richness of the espresso mixed with the creaminess of the milk, a combination of sweet and savoury that's satisfying and palatable. The red wine will give you more of an esoteric and subjective experience. You'll get a more bitter first impression, but when you let air into your mouth, chemical compounds will react with the oxygen to create notes of dark chocolate, cherry, or maybe black pepper. Now, if you drink 3/4 of that caramel latte and then immediately switch to the red wine, that wine's going to taste like battery acid. Why? Because your palate has adapted to the sweetness of the syrup and the milk in the latte. That doesn't make the red wine a bad drink, nor does it mean that the sweetness of the latte renders it infantile. It just means that your brain was expecting one sensation and it got another. I use this analogy not for the first time to describe how audiences and fandoms, accustomed to the Marvel method of storytelling, may have had such a viscerally negative reaction to Batman v Superman upon release. Of course, some might reply with, it's just a bad movie, brah. But please, just hear me out. Critical reviews at the time, and since, bemoaned the lack of fun superhero escapism. These were, the critics seemed to feel, supposed to be amusing distractions from the world around us, not ponderous reflections on it.
Your booze mean nothing, I've seen what makes you cheer.
Press critics may have been annoyed by the film, but throughout the YouTube geek diaspora, many reviewers took the film as a personal affront. A prime example of this was Robert Movie Bob Chipman. Batman v Superman was so offensive to his sensibilities that he repurposed a recurring section of his channel called Really That Good, in which he argues why beloved films remained worthy of their reputations, to litigate why BVS was really that bad. He was not alone in his sentiments. YouTube critics and video SES alike joined the dogpile, bemoaning Zack Snyder's perceived lack of understanding of both Superman and Batman, declaratively stating their subjective personal opinions as objective facts. Batman does not kill. Snyder's Batman sucks. The worst superhero movie ever made ? This isn't me throwing shade at those individual creators, I actually like some of them quite a bit. I'm just highlighting how popular creators with sizable platforms created a bandwagon effect with a shared consensus that seemed increasingly irrefutable. There was a right way to do these things, and Zack Snyder was doing them the wrong way. When Captain America Civil War was released later that year, its metronome pacing, ability to build on pre-established character relationships, and billion-dollar box office take seemed to further signify that this was the way to do a superhero v superhero smackdown. For my own part, when I first saw Batman v Superman, my initial reaction was numbness. This was partly due to the fact that I chose to see the film in IMAX, and viscerally it was a lot. In fact, this was one of the rare instances where I'd recommend seeing a film on a smaller screen before catching it in IMAX, just because there's so much going on in every shot to be absorbed and digested, to the point where it can be overwhelming on a screen that large. Even as I sat with it for a few days, I wasn't quite sure what to make of it. The film was too far removed from the film I'd written and shot in my head that I was left reeling. I came to realise that I needed to get out of my own way and accept the film for what it was, not what I was expecting it to be, a lesson that I'm still trying to learn for Superman 2025. I went back and revisited the film in the cinema 3 times that spring. Each time, I appreciated it a little more. The film's densely layered plot, its anti-elitist politics, its dazzling visuals and action scenes. Subsequent viewings brought it all together for me. It wasn't until the release of the Ultimate Edition on home media, however, that I truly fell in love with Batman v Superman. The 3-hour cut added much needed connective tissue between action set pieces that not only allowed dramatic moments to breathe, but clarified characters' motivations and intentions, and reintroduced some of Amy Adams' best work as Lois Lane, as well as situating the film more broadly in an overarching DC narrative. It also leans much harder into the scathing critique of US foreign policy and the military-industrial complex that was present in Man of Steel. These elements come together to add more nuance and texture to the film in ways that I think make it infinitely more rewarding. That said, if you're someone who didn't enjoy the theatrical version of the film, I can see why investing a further 3 hours into a film you don't like might not be an appealing prospect. To this day, Batman v Superman remains a film that genuinely improves for me every time I see it. There's so much stuffed into every frame that every viewing yields up a new nuance of production design or a different aspect of an actor's performance. There's a wonderful podcast called BVS by the Minute that breaks down just how much is going on in the film on a minute-by-minute basis. While I'm not deluded enough to presume that the film is well liked or well remembered broadly, I'm comforted by the fact that I'm not alone in loving it. We all know what happened next. When Batman v Superman's theatrical release failed to clear the $1 billion they felt themselves entitled to, key figures in Warner Bros. Management shat the proverbial bed. The handling of DC properties became increasingly risk-averse. While Wonder Woman, thankfully, remained largely unscrewed with, top-down mandates enforced that future DC films hew closer to the Marvel method. Suicide Squad was reverse-engineered into the hyperactive love child of Guardians of the Galaxy and Deadpool. In the wake of Zack Snyder's personal tragedy, the opportunistic studio execs, hungry for their annual bonuses, brought Joss Whedon on board to chop and reshape Justice League into an Avengers-flavoured Marvel McNugget. That's not a slight on either Avengers films or McNuggets. It just signals a clear abandonment of creative intent in favour of box office viability. This is capitalism after all. And while I think there's more than enough room for both flavours in the buffet of cinema, we are where we are. 10 years in a rebooted DC universe later, it all feels a little bit homogenous, and if I'm completely honest, my appetite is dwindling. Batman v Superman isn't a sugar rush. It's the sort of film that's designed to be ruminated upon, revisited and pondered. I liken it to Blade Runner in that regard, a film that was widely panned on release, but retained an intensely loyal cult following that eventually rehabilitated its reputation. In the years since its release, there are a handful of video analyses that give me some slight hope that the cultural memory of BVS may yet be redeemed in hindsight. Loverboy Media, for instance, created a compelling and commendably honest account of how he went from viscerally hating Batman v Superman and Zack Snyder's take to accepting and eventually loving the film on its own terms. While I'm not actively trying to convert anybody, I dearly hope that 10 years on from its contentious release, audiences take the time to revisit this film and try to engage with what it was trying to say about hope, heroism, redemption and compassion in a world that sorely needs them. Even if this film and this universe are not for you, I hope you'll stop to consider why the fans of these films still fight for them so ardently. This film, this trilogy, this depiction of the DC universe mean a great deal to me personally. They help me navigate a very difficult time. Now, perhaps more than ever, they continue to inform and inspire me on a personal, philosophical and political level. If you've enjoyed this video and you'd like me to make more, I'd appreciate you dropping it a like, or better yet, sharing your experience with this film in the comments. Have your attitudes changed in the years since its release? I'd genuinely love to know your thoughts, even if you're not a fan. Anyway, take care my friend, be kind, and in a world that's precision engineered to induce outrage, I hope you're able to avoid the fever, the rage, the feeling of powerlessness that turned good people cruel. There seems to be too much of it around these days. See you soon.